What's up, you guys? And in today's video, we're going to be talking about this, the Asics Metaspeed 2. Before we get into it, guys, I know it's been a while since I've done a video, since I've uploaded a video. So I really appreciate if this is your first time tuning in, please click the subscribe button below. If at the end of this video, if you enjoyed it, please give this video a solid thumbs up. And yeah, so it's been a while since I've done a video. There's been a lot going on. Some of it is just work related. Some of it is just family related, just been busy with life. There's just things going on. And, you know, I appreciate all the support from all of you guys out there. I do read your comments. I do hop on YouTube, pretty much every day, to read comments, to read questions, to respond if I can. You know, there's a lot that, that goes into, you know, trying to keep these videos going. But unfortunately, I've got a lot that are on my computer because I used a different camera for these videos, and I just haven't had a chance to go and edit them. And you know, that's on me. It's, you know, time has not been good. Also, where I live, we were affected by Hurricane Ian. Not so much like the people down south in South Florida did. They got absolutely hammered with Hurricane Ian. We got, you know, some strong winds, some rain, but that was pretty much it. We didn't have any major damage to my personal property or really any areas around me. So, but because of that, there is a link that I'm going to put in the description below that is to a donation site to help those families that are in South Florida. And whether it's a small donation or a large donation, you know, as a running community, especially down there in South Florida, that's absolutely beautiful. They have some really, you know, beautiful sunset areas that you can go for runs. It's just, to me, all those families that were affected and pretty much lost everything from the storm surge, from wind damage, from, you know, everything. It would just be greatly appreciated if you all would help out, you know, even in the smallest bit, to just make a small donation to just help those families out. I'm not sponsored by them or whatever, but it's just to help them out. It just really, you know, I just really appreciate, you know, anything that we can help, you know, my fellow Floridians with is greatly appreciated. All right. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot going on, in my life. I literally just got back from a run. As you can see, I'm still a little sweaty. Weather's kind of cooled down a little bit, finally getting some miles in, that feel like quality miles. Feeling like I'm getting the quality miles in. That's something that, you know, I didn't really feel like I've been getting the past couple of months because it's been so hot and so humid. The one positive that the hurricane did was it literally ended summer. The hurricane came through and brought in cooler and drier air, which has been fantastic. It's been in the 60s in the morning, which for some people is still very warm, but for me, that's actually nice. And the humidity was kind of brought down. So it's been actually very pleasant. So I'm very happy to get back out and do some really good quality running. In fact, I've got a pair of shoes on right now that eventually I will be doing a review on here in a little bit, but I think these shoes are great long distance runners for heavier people. So if you're a heavier runner, stay tuned. I will have a new video on these shoes coming up. But in the meantime, we've got the Asics Metaspeed 2. This is a highly anticipated shoe from Asics. No, it really isn't, because nobody really cared about the first version of the shoe. And so yeah, when this came out, I don't really know if there's really a hype train behind it, because everybody really cared about the Nova Blast 3 or the Glide Ride 3. And this kind of got shoved on the wayside because it looks very much like the Asics Metaspeed Edge Plus. And nobody cared. We're going to talk about it. So the upper on this shoe, I've got about 20 miles in this shoe, by the way. I've done multiple different types of runs in this shoe, and we'll get into how that went and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to talk about the upper first. It is a very breathable, very thin upper material here. It reminds me actually of the original Endorphin Speed. The original Endorphin Speed was kind of had that thin racy layer underneath, and then it had like this plasticky layer on top. In fact, I got it sitting right here. Yeah, so I had to actually look at the two shoes and be like, wow, these are so much more similar than I had initially thought. But it had this, plasticky layer kind of sitting right on top. It's hard to see. To kind of give it a little bit more durability and a little bit better lockdown. And Asics kind of did the same thing on this one. They have that kind of thin plasticky layer on top that gives it a little bit better lockdown and a little bit more durability to last you a lot longer, because this is a trainer shoe. It's not a racing shoe that you're only going to use for those races. This is a shoe that you can put a lot of miles in. And there's a lot in here as to why they would build it this way. So, but the upper, it's true to size. It has ample toe box room, which is really nice. It's got, if you have slightly wider feet like I do, I'm not a wide foot, but if you're slightly wider, this is a really comfortable toe box for you. It has a little bit of space to kind of wiggle your toes around in. I really appreciate that. Plenty of space here in the forefoot area. Nice structure in the toe box as well. You don't feel like your toes are getting too tight and laid, up on. There's enough volume and width in here to be super comfortable in these shoes. The lacing system, just solid, nothing to write home about. The laces are rather thin. They're not like those cheese slicer type of laces that were in the first version of the Nova Blast, but they're definitely thin. But they give you a lot of lacing, which is nice because you can run the runner's knot or runner's loop on this shoe, which is just really nice. And there's plenty of it, so you don't have to worry about like, oh, well, yeah, there's enough, but I still have like, I'd say rabbit ears, from like being a kid, because I have kids that are, learning how to tie shoes and stuff. But you got enough that it looks like a regular lacing, and you can still do the runner's loop to give you that extra lockdown. I don't know if you necessarily need to do the extra lockdown, the extra lace loop in this shoe. We'll get into that here in a second, but the tongue is a thin tongue. It's a very thin tongue, you can see. But it lays on top of the foot really well. It is semi-gusseted, so it's not like full booty construction in the forefoot. You just have two gusset tabs running on each side of the foot. You do get the nice Asics overlays here, which I'm sure probably provide a little bit of structure and a little bit of lockdown to the midfoot area. If it does, it doesn't feel like much, because I'm not gonna lie, once you lace this up and you get a nice lockdown to it, it almost just melts away. It doesn't feel like there's anything on your foot. It's actually quite a fantastic upper, in my opinion anyways, especially for a tempo trainer. You got some nice padding around the heel collar, which is nice. You do get a little bit of heel structure back here, and this is what I was talking about with the heel lift issue. So if you actually look at the design of this, you can see how it curves, and this kind of cups around the heel ball of your foot. And it provides just a really solid lockdown. I never really had, even when I ran in this with regular lacing, not the runner's knot or runner's loop, but just regular lacing, I never really had a problem with heel lift on this shoe. It just was comfortable no matter how I did it. I just liked this because when I was doing some faster pace efforts, it just made me feel more like locked in or more secure in the shoe. That's the only reason why I did it. And then I've just kind of enjoyed having the laces that way. Overall, the upper is super breathable. It's super light. It's just comfortable. It definitely feels racy, which is something that you want out of a tempo trainer, something that you could essentially race in a shoe like this. So the upper, I'm definitely happy with it. Now, moving on to the midsole, it does feel very much, by the way, it does feel very much, because I have the Metaspeed Sky, the original Metaspeed Sky, and it does feel very much like the original Metaspeed Sky upper, even on the inside. The one thing I like about this upper compared to the Metaspeed Sky is that this actually has the gussets on the side, because the Metaspeed Sky doesn't. So I do appreciate that, because the tongue just lays on top of the foot really well. You don't have to worry about it bunching up or sliding down or anything. It's just, it stays right where it's supposed to be. Metaspeed Sky, kind of have to work with it before you can finally lock yourself in. So yeah, that's kind of the thing with the upper. I really enjoy the upper. I think it's fantastic upper. It's super comfortable. I would say, like, if you're looking at plush uppers, it's not anything to write home about. But if you're looking at it from a tempo trainer standpoint, it's a pretty good upper. It's pretty solid. It definitely feels like a race shoe. Whether that's good or bad, that's your decision. But for a racing type of shoe, I'd say it feels good. Going on to the midsole, got a lot going on in this midsole here, and typically, like tempo trainers usually are, there's a lot going on. This has two different type of midsole foams, and it's got a plate in it. It's got a carbon infused TPU plate that is rather rigid. It does have some flexibility to it. I'm putting a lot of pressure into this shoe. Well, not a lot, but a pretty decent amount of pressure into this shoe, and it's definitely not flexing like, say, the Endorphin Speed that I have sitting right here, ironically enough, where I can just flex this shoe pretty easily, right? It's definitely not like that. You definitely have a little bit of rigidity in this shoe, but it's not like a typical carbon fiber plate where it just has zero bend to it whatsoever. This one actually does have a little bit of flexibility to the shoe, and you do kind of notice it when you're out there on the run. The midsole foams are, you got Flight Foam Blast Plus, which you can see right here, which is a updated version of regular Flight Foam Blast that was, founded basically in the Nova Blast. And it's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit more responsive, a little bit bouncier type of midsole foam. It's supposed to also be a little bit softer too. We'll get into that here in a second. And then underneath that, so you can kind of see it, you probably see it more on this side, on the medial side, but you can see there's a line right here, and that's where the two foams kind of come together. So that thin layer that's underneath the forefoot here, that's really the thin layer that's underneath the plate, because that's how low the plate actually comes underneath your forefoot. So you're sitting on top of all this Flight Foam Blast Plus in the forefoot. And I'll get into that here in a little bit. And then it kind of comes up and you get this kind of a thicker layer of regular Flight Foam here in the heel. So that thin layer across the front all the way up to the thicker layer in the heel is just regular Flight Foam. And regular Flight Foam, it's been around for a long time. And it's a pretty resilient type of foam. You can see as I'm pushing on here, a lot of responsiveness. It's got a lot of pushback on it, but it's not super squishy, not compared to the regular Flight Foam Blast or the Flight Foam Blast Plus that's here in the forefoot. That is still takes a little bit of pressure in this shoe, but it's got a nice bounce back to it. So that's kind of the midsole foam here. I'm going to get in how that runs here in just a second. And then kind of moving on to the outsole, you've got Asics rubber outsole, so it's not AHAR Plus or AHAR rubber. It is Asics rubber that was primarily used on a lot of their trail running shoes. They've kind of brought that over to a lot of their road shoes. And you get a thick layer of it. You can see there is a thick layer of rubber underneath here. And you got some pretty decent coverage here. It's very reminiscent of actually it's the same exact design as the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus and the Metaspeed Edge Plus running shoes. A little different from the Metaspeed Skies that I have. So you got the rubber that comes around the lateral side here, and then you got a little bit of rubber here on the medial side, and you got a lot of exposed foam right here. And of course you got the rubber here in the forefoot with all these speed holes. I like to call them speed holes here in the forefoot. And I'm sure the holes are there for, one, providing a little bit of extra traction, which they do really well. And I'm sure to lessen the weight on the shoe, just like they did in the Metaspeed Sky, Metaspeed Edge, all that kind of stuff. And then the rubber kind of comes back here, all the way back here to the edge, which is kind of nice because on the Metaspeed Sky, it like ends right here. And so everybody would wear out this section right here and just absolutely eat into that midsole foam. Now, like I said, I do have about 20 miles on these shoes, and right now I am seeing absolutely no wear on the rubber whatsoever, which is typical for anything that's made by Asics. It's going to last what seems like forever and probably go through the apocalypse and still survive. But what is surprising for me is the exposed midsole foam after 20 miles. I am not seeing any abrasions or wear or whatever on this midsole foam, on this regular flight foam that's right here. Not seeing anything. Even with the little bit of heel striking, it looks in perfect condition. Can't say that about the Metaspeed Sky. I can't say that about that. But the Magic Speed, yeah, resilient. So far, and my roads, by the way, I think I've said it in other videos, my roads are really abrasive. They're like sandpaper, so exposed foams usually get chewed up relatively quickly. And this one's doing pretty good. I've got showing like no wear on this whatsoever after 20 miles. It's pretty sweet. Right, so light, it's a very light shoe. I think it's like 8.4 or 8.6 ounces in a men's size 9, which is really nice. I went true to size. So a men's 10.5 for me is perfect. And how it runs, this is where it gets interesting. So let me just go into categories first. Definitely tempo day. Definitely for intervals. Definitely for speed workouts. If you're talking about daily trainer, see, to me, daily mileage is kind of putting in about a 5 effort. And if I'm putting in a 5 effort, I want something that's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more cushiony, a little bit more bouncy, something like that. This doesn't really fit the bill for me anyways. And usually because I'm a heavier runner, I usually tend to compress midsole foams relatively easily. And this doesn't really compress too well. If I had to put it on a scale within the tempo trainer category, and that includes shoes like the Boston 10, the Puma DV8 Nitro, the Saucony Endorphin Speed, all those type of shoes, this shoe kind of fits almost right in the middle, maybe closer to the firmer category side. So kind of leaning not quite as firm as the Boston 10s, but not as soft as, I'm going to say, the DV8 Nitro, because I know some people say that the DV8 Nitro is a little firm. I actually find the DV8 Nitro to be like soft, perfectly soft. So yeah, it's not quite super firm, but it's not on the soft side. I actually put it very closely because so this was where things got interesting for me. I actually did a run in this, and then later on in the day, I did a run in the Endorphin Speed, just because I was like, man, they just feel so similar to each other, and they really actually do feel very similar to each other in a lot of ways. So the forefoot area to me is probably the biggest difference, maybe similarity, but a little bit different. Because I feel like you get a little bit, if you're up on your toes in either one of these shoes and you're going at your faster efforts, I feel like this has a little bit more bounce to it. It's got a little bit more cushion, but a little bit more bounce, a little bit more energy return. Now, if you're landing midfoot and trying to use the shoe's energy to kind of push you forward, I feel like that's where the Endorphin Speed would have the advantage, because it's an 8mm drop. You've got a little bit more stack here in the heel, and you've got all of that flight foam Power Run PB midsole foam back here to kind of give you that bounce and energy return moving forward. The regular flight foam that's in here is not as bouncy. It absorbs impacts really well, but it's not bouncy, so it really doesn't give you that energy return. So if you land midfoot or heel, it just doesn't give you that pop that you're looking for. You almost kind of have to stay on your toes and really use that guide sole technology. Now, this does have a 6mm drop. I believe it's 26mm in the forefoot and 32 in the heel. So not like maximum stack height shoe, but it's up there. It's pretty good. Again, right on par with something like the Endorphin Speed, so it's perfect. But it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't have that like super bounce energy return that you get out of shoes like the Endorphin Speed, or dare I say it, but the Puma DV8 Nitro, which to me, I feel like has, a really good amount of energy return with that nitrogen infused midsole foam there. So this shoe, if you use that guide sole and you use that carbon infused TPU plate, it has a lot of kind of pop and energy return. And that's where this shoe really comes alive. It's a shoe that I find very good at those faster efforts. When I've done interval runs in this shoe, it seems like it just wants to go fast. Even when I've tried to do warm-ups in this shoe, it wants to go fast right out of the gate. You know, where I'm trying to maybe warm up at about a 9:30, 9:45 pace for, you know, a half mile or for, you know, 5 minutes or whatever. This shoe's wanting to go at like an 8:30, 8:20 pace right out of the gate. And even then, it feels more comfortable being at like a 7:30 or faster. Like that's where the shoe really feels comfortable to me. So you're kind of getting up at that racing type of pace. So to me, I haven't really taken this on a long run. I've taken this on up to, I think it's about 4.5 miles. I think it's the furthest that I've gone in this shoe. And that was kind of a tempo run, where it was just a kind of a trying to get a little bit longer. I think it was a half-mile warm up and then 4 miles at tempo, you know, at a tempo pace, kind of my 6, maybe 7 out of 10 effort. And it seemed to do really well, but it almost seemed like at certain points it did want to go faster. And maybe it's just me, maybe it's a shoe, I don't know, but it seemed like it wanted to go faster. Yeah, and that's kind of like, I don't know, it's a shoe that I want to get a long run in at a little bit slower pace, see if I can slow it down, see if I can slow myself down in this shoe, to see how it feels. But again, 20 miles in the shoe, trying to get you guys a first initial impression on this shoe. And I think that this is a shoe that I'm kind of excited for. I think this is a shoe that you can race in. I don't know if I'd want to take it to a full marathon distance because I feel like it's a little too firm. Maybe once it's broken in, it'll be better. But right now, it's a shoe that up to half marathon distance for sure, I'd take it. You can race in it at your 5 or 10K. I think you're going to do great because it's light, it's responsive, it's got a lot of energy return to it. You got the guide sole, all that kind of stuff. And the price point. I think the price point is an important part here. $150. For a tempo trainer, that's insane. The Endorphin Speed is $170. The new Endorphin Speed, the Endorphin Speed 3 is $170. The Puma DV8 Nitro is $160. The brand new Boston 11 is $160, which I don't know if that's really worth it or not, to be honest with you, but whatever. And then you got the Zoom Fly 5, which is also $160. So this one kind of comes in at the lower end of the cost range. So I got to give it to Asics for keeping the price low on this shoe, low by standards of a tempo trainer. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a decent shoe. I really do. I don't really have a scoring scale because I haven't gotten it to 50 miles, but when I get there, I'll do another video on this. So again, guys, please stay tuned for some more videos that'll be coming up. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, enjoy the run. See you next time.